My neighbors are suing me over a cat that doesn't even belong to me. The knock on my door should have been routine neighborly communication, but the conversation that followed revealed just how quickly reasonable people can become completely unreasonable when medical bills are involved. My neighbor stood on my porch explaining that the feral cat I'd seen sunning itself on our patio table had bitten her son, and somehow that made me financially responsible for his rabies treatment. The cat bit my son, she said, getting straight to the point. Has it had its rabies shot? I explained that it was a stray cat with a clipped ear, which usually indicated it had been spayed and vaccinated at some point, but that boosters were needed periodically. The conversation quickly turned accusatory as she demanded to know why we were letting a potentially rabid cat hang out on our property instead of calling animal control. The assumption that we had any control over a feral cat's movements was absurd from the start. This cat wandered the entire neighborhood, appearing in multiple yards, under cars, and anywhere else it felt like going. We'd never fed it, never provided bedding or toys, never done anything to encourage its presence beyond having a patio table that happened to catch afternoon sunlight, but apparently, witnessing a cat's existence on our property made us responsible for its behavior. A few days later, both parents appeared at my door with a more formal demand. The husband informed me that their son required multiple rabies shots at significant expense, and they expected my boyfriend and me to reimburse them for the medical costs. You accepted responsibility for the cat by letting it stay on your property, he argued, as if property ownership came with automatic wildlife management duties. It's not our cat, I protested, pointing out that the animal roamed freely throughout the neighborhood and could be seen in other people's yards regularly. But logic wasn't part of their equation anymore. I'm not here to argue, the husband said dismissively. You know what you need to do. We'll drop the bill off next week. The entitlement was staggering. They decided we owed them money and weren't interested in discussing the fundamental flaws in their reasoning. The legal demand letter that arrived 2 weeks later contained an interesting detail that made their entire story suspect. Instead of mentioning a cat bite, the letter referenced a dog bite, despite the fact that we don't own a dog. And the original incident had clearly involved the neighborhood stray cat. Either they'd hired the most careless lawyer imaginable, or something more deliberate was happening. The discrepancy made me research cat bites versus dog bites and rabies protocols. Cat bites rarely require the extensive rabies shot series that dog bites might, and animal control typically quarantines animals when rabies exposure is a genuine concern. The fact that no officials had ever contacted us about quarantining or testing the cat suggested that the medical necessity of the treatment might have been questionable from the beginning. My father's lawyer friend helped us draft a response letter that politely but firmly rejected their demands and explained why we had no legal liability for a feral animal's actions. The letter pointed out that we'd never fed, housed, or cared for the cat in any way that would establish ownership or responsibility. Wild animals go where they choose, and property owners aren't automatically liable for wildlife behavior on their land. The neighbor's silence following our response spoke volumes about the weakness of their case. Through neighborhood gossip, we learned that the husband remained angry about our refusal to pay, but his wife's brother, apparently the lawyer who'd sent the demand letter, had convinced him that pursuing the matter in court would be futile. The family connection explained the out-of-town law firm, and possibly the strategic error of mentioning a dog instead of a cat. More telling were the stories from longtime neighbors about this couple's pattern of behavior. They'd previously sent demand letters to someone who'd accidentally damaged their car mirror, continuing the harassment for a full year, despite insurance covering the repair. They'd also sued a corner store after the wife slipped on ice, only to have the case dismissed when it was determined the store wasn't responsible for clearing that particular area. The pattern revealed people who saw every minor incident as a potential payday, who approached life with the assumption that someone else should always pay for their problems. They weren't necessarily running elaborate scams, but they'd developed a worldview where accountability flowed in only one direction, away from themselves and toward whoever had the misfortune of being nearby when problems occurred. The feral cat continued its neighborhood rounds, oblivious to the legal drama its bite had created. The clipped ear that marked it as part of a trap-neuter return program suggested that someone had already taken responsibility for managing the stray population humanely, which made the neighbors' demands for us to have done something even more unreasonable. 6 months later, we still see the neighbors occasionally, though they no longer speak to us. Their attempt to extract money from us over a wild animal's behavior had failed, but the experience taught us something valuable about the lengths some people will go to avoid taking responsibility for their own choices. Their son had been bitten because he'd approached a feral cat, not because we'd somehow created a dangerous situation on our property. Sometimes being a good neighbor means helping when genuine emergencies arise, but it also means refusing to enable people who try to turn every accident into someone else's financial obligation. The stray cat taught us that some problems aren't anyone's fault, and that's a lesson worth defending, even when it costs relationships with unreasonable people who can't accept that reality includes risks no one can control.